Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to be going over the potential status conditions that either could or will exist in Kindred Fates. Now, we do know for sure that status conditions will be present within the game, as well as various buffs and debuffs, both thanks to the gameplay trailers and because I slid into Andrew's DMs. Now, throughout this video, I'd like to explore these potential conditions and speculate on how they could function. Now, with that being said, I am going to split this video up with types, as most conditions we see in games like Pokemon or Temtem tend to work off various typings, i.e. like the burn status for fire, the poison status for poison. I also see the light and dark type creating the widest variety of debuffs, while the other typings providing more general status effects, seeing as light and dark types specifically feature buffs and debuffs respectively. I think that this topic is something that is made even more interesting by the real-time nature of the game, so status conditions we generally see could be vastly different than they would be in a turn-based game. Anyways, intro aside, let's dive right into the first potential condition, which I just mentioned before, that being the burn status. Now, interestingly, if we look at the Kindred Fates combat teaser video, we see something that's a bit suspicious. When K-Knight hits Skullkin with its Ring of Fire attack, Skullkin seems to take multiple damage hits. Now, originally I thought this was just because Skullkin was in the Ring of Fire, but if you look closely, that's not the case. Perhaps this is a burn status condition functioning as limited damage over time. Other than that, I could see burn having additional effects like it does in other taming games. For example, in both Temtem and Pokemon, despite working differently, burn seems to lower offensive stats, which always seemed a little strange to me. Like, why does being burned make your attacking power go down? If anything, it should make your defense go down. I mean, think about it. If you just burn your hand on something and then someone hits your hand, it's going to hurt a lot more. So I could see it giving you an additional defense debuff or something to that extent. Okay, so since water type also incorporates the ice themed kinfolk, I could see perhaps a freeze status existing, and I had a pretty cool idea as to how it could work. Since the game functions in real-time combat, I was thinking that when you take certain icy attacks, it could build a cold meter, and when that cold meter reaches full, it could either stun or slow for a certain amount of time. I could see this working similarly to how stuns and slows work in League of Legends. This would make a lot of sense as well, given water's advantage over fire, who are generally zoners that want to rush in and rush out. Next status I could see existing relates to the Gaia type, and that's an absorption or a leeching status, similar to how Leech Seed works in Pokemon. Basically, in Kindred Fates, I could see an attack that when contact is made, it makes you absorb HP for a certain amount of time. Perhaps they could even have it so that maybe you have to be within a certain proximity for the HP to continue draining, and if you get too far away, it stops. So there is a way to run out of it, giving zoners an advantage on Gaia type. Gaia Kinfolk are also primarily focused on utilizing minions and tokens, so I could see them perhaps using this as a way to heal while attacking at the same time. Now, another status effect from the same type is a regeneration status, where they simply heal over time. We actually see something interesting in one of the Kindred Fates newsletter updates that seems to be some sort of regeneration effect. It is green, which suggests a Gaia typing, but more so than that, if you zoom in, you can see these little pluses, so I'm assuming that means it's healing. Now, air type is actually something really interesting. So Kindred Fates doesn't have an electric or a lightning type, so I could see some of the elements existing within this type as well as the light type. Now, with that being said, I could see a status condition for paralysis, whether or not it be for light or for air is depending on where they decide to go with it, but a paralysis effect could be something that maybe creates a slower stun effect that periodically hits you, and then it lasts for a certain amount of time. So every few seconds you kind of get a little stun, and then that total status condition lasts for however many seconds total. Overall, air is a really interesting type because it can also incorporate icy elements such as cold hurricanes and whatnot, so perhaps we could even see the air type contribute to freeze statuses as well. Now, with regards to the earth type, I could see a lot of debuffs and buffs associated with it just because of the entire strategy being based around walling and sort of outlasting their opponents. Now, with that being said, it is kind of difficult to come up with typical status effects that an earth type would provide. With something like Gaia, it's easy to see like a leeching effect, or with water, it's easy to see ice, but earth's a little different. There are a couple ideas I could think of, like I could perhaps see a status condition that's associated with burrowing underground, so it would be a positive status condition and it maybe gives you a regeneration effect, or even like an earth shield that adds an additional health bar, sort of like what we see in Monster Sanctuary, giving you a little bit of a shield status. But in terms of specific earth themed statuses, I'm not too sure, because when I think of like earth based attacks that could, like, let's say slow you, I think of like quicksand, but that would be more of a debuff than it would be of a status in and of itself. Okay, so with the mecha type, I could see a really interesting status effect, and that being the bleed status. Now, like the frozen status and the way bleed works in Dark Souls, I could see a bleed meter stacking up, and then once that bleed meter is full, either the enemy takes a chunk of their health as damage, or they bleed out and sort of take whittling damage over time. This status effect specifically makes sense with a mecha type because, you know, sharp metal can make you bleed if you get cut. It could also work with other typings as well. We could see sharp stones for the earth type. We could see sharp winds for the wind type, icicles for the ice type. This is a status that I think associates associates best with Mecha, but could work in other places as well. So with the Null type, I could also see a pretty interesting status, and I'd call it like nullified or normalized or neutralized or something to that extent. Basically, this is going to be a sort of hazing effect where it just negates all stat changes, all boosts, everything. It just sets everything back to 0. This specific effect could be really useful against Earth types who want to sort of start healing themselves and throwing statuses at you, or even Dark and Light types who want to play around with buffs and debuffs. It would basically act like Rapid Spin or Defog from Pokemon. I could also see it disallowing buffs and debuffs for a certain amount of time while you have the status condition up. So with Light and Dark, I'm going to sort of cover them together because the buffs and debuffs that I could see associated with both of these types wouldn't necessarily be status effects per se, and I could see a lot of them having opposite effects. So let's say Light can heal itself, Dark might be able to damage over time. Let's say Light could invigorate, Dark would demoralize, stuff like that. I will quickly say though, I do think the Dark type could have a poison status associated with it because there is no clear poison type, and with Dark type specifically being themed around sort of using underhanded tactics, poison seems right up the alley of such misdeeds. Poison's also a pretty common weapon of Shinobi, which at least in Pokemon, the Dark type has some sort of ninja-esque element, so there's that too. Other than that, I see a lot of debuffs and buffs coming out of both typings. We do see a slow debuff existing within the Kindred Fates trailer that shows Skullkin slowing Kadoki, and even more so than that, I could see perhaps debuffs to various stats existing as well. Conversely, I could see the Light type having boosting effects as well as healing over time. Given the way that Dark will function with debuffs and trickery, I could almost see it working like Zora if you've ever watched Black Clover, emphasizing traps that will reduce various stats and perhaps cause damage, cause slows, stuns, stamina deterioration, etc. With Light, on the other hand, I imagine it being more useful in 2v2, providing support with various buffs to its allies' stats, as well as perhaps increasing movement speed, increasing stamina regeneration, increasing perhaps dodge frames, etc. I see that working like Wendy from Fairy Tail if you've seen that anime. So there is one more interesting effect that I saw in the Kindred Fates trailer, and I wanted to talk about it because it's a little odd. If you look at Skullkin's HP bar, when K-Knight uses this ground pounding effect, it turns blue, and right after it gets caught. Now, does this have something to do with the capture mechanic, or is this some sort of debuff as well? Let me know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments about it. Overall, given Kindred Fates' focus on real-time combat coupled with the various types, I think we're going to see a wide variety of both status conditions and move effects, and overall that makes me really excited. I feel like Kindred Fates is going to provide us with a large amount of complexity in that regard. But with all that being said, I want to know what you guys think about this. Let me know if there are any status conditions that you think could exist that I didn't mention, or if you had any interesting ideas regarding potential buffs or debuffs. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to like and subscribe, follow me on Twitter at GymLeaderEd, check out our subscriber Discord, all links in the description. Until next time, peace.